2025 has been it's been an interesting year for me, my dude.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for all of us, and it's only just March now.
Yeah. And yeah, you know what I really want though out of the rest of the year?
What's that?
All I really want is some patience.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of the planet. Not just of Mississippi, not of, like, I guess Earth and the planet are the same thing. I mean, anyways, all sides of the planet. This podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And it is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I'm the only. I am the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, I am the only, I am the often disputed Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you who don't know what we do here on Hey, Listen to This, basically me and Ryan look at each other and say, hey, listen to this. And what does that entail? Well, week by week, we go over certain albums that we've chosen for either thematic reasons or reasons of recency or just stuff we like listening to. And before we get into what we're doing for this week, Ryan, what did we do last week?
So, last week, we finished up our, apparently we are starting DEI initiatives here at Hey, Listen to This. So, last week was our last review in, February of 2025. So, we capped it off with the 1971 album by Miles Davis, and that album is called, in case of those of you who don't want to do Google right now, that album is called A Tribute to Jack Johnson. Not the guitarist who wrote Banana Pancakes, not the hockey player who has been traded to multiple different teams right now and is a Stanley Cup champion, the boxer. And, walking away from the review myself, I was very glad that I had the opportunity to do the review with you, because up until that point, I wasn't even aware of that album, to be fair. Miles Davis has 30,000 different albums to his name right now. So, it's a very easy thing for, somebody with, at least my background of Miles Davis and jazz music as a whole to, have that album slip through the cracks there.
Yeah, it's one that really hasn't received a whole lot of recognition compared to the likes of Kind of Blue or Bitches Brew or In a Silent Way or maybe even some other stuff like On the Corner, but it deserves it because it's, again, like I said, it's such a great album. And if you want to figure out how great me and Ryan think it is, the episode's up on all our platforms.
And, before you even check out the episode, check out the album for yourself. I mean, it's even though it's only a 2-track, 50-minute LP, it's a pretty decent listen, even if you don't have to really, really drill down and pay attention to it the way that we did. But shifting over to this week and another DEI initiative that we have here at Hey, Listen to This. It's March, and March is Women's History Month. And last week, I gave you the opportunity to choose between two record labels, and turns out I actually did a little bit of some back research today, why I thought Rhino Records released will help produce the album that we're covering today. That's because for the 25th anniversary, Rhino Records had an actual hand in the production of it, so I don't feel so crazy.
Well, that's good at least, but it is funny that you gave me the choice between two record labels and we ended up talking about a third. So aside from that, what album are we doing to start Women's History Month?
So the album that we're covering this week is the album that was released in 1995, and that album is Jagged Little Pill. And that album was released by Alanis Morissette. And for those of you who are out there right now wondering what a Alanis Morissette is, well, let me tell you. So, Alanis Morissette I mean, most of the people out there might know who Alanis Morissette is, but like, this is just the background of what we're gonna like, how I'm gonna lay the framework for this review here. So, Alanis Morissette is a Canadian and American singer songwriter and musician. So she does music. I mean, to put it like a very blunt way. I mean, we're talking about one of her albums that's very redundant. She was born June 1st, 1974. She was born in Gemini. And she began her career in the early 90s in Canada with two dance pop albums, Atlantic and Now Is the Time. And after some time, she relocated to LA and she released this album that we're talking about today. And it has become one of the best-selling albums of all time, and it has appeared on several all-time lists, best albums of the '90s. But insert random list you can think of. This album's probably on that list. And what made this album on the production front a little bit special compared to her two previous albums, is that in LA, she met producer and songwriter Glenn Ballard. And Glenn himself, he believed in Alanis' talent enough to let her use his studio. And, through their partnership, they wrote songs. And, those songs eventually became this album. And another thing of note about, that partnership that Glenn and Alanis had is the fact that, instead of trying to shape Alanis' sound to meet his own, he basically supplemented and basically expanded upon what Alanis was bringing to the table. So, yeah, that's basically the groundwork of the Jagged Little Pill and Alanis Morissette as a whole. And my personal experience with this album and Alanis Morissette as an artist and me as being a music fan is, I kind of knew about songs growing up, You Ought to Know, Hand in My Pocket, Ironic, a couple of the big singles that we're going to be talking about later on when we get to them in the review. And I remember one summer, a couple of years ago, HBO Max, they released a documentary basically detailing and fleshing out, how this album came to be and, all the different things that this album brought to the table and its legacy. The whole nine yards. Figure, your classic VH1 Beyond the Music, and that's basically that. And I watched that, and I grew a new appreciation for Alanis Morissette as an artist. To be fair, I haven't, stepped outside of her, discography other than this album. But, I mean, we'll get into, our thoughts and feelings about the album as a whole. But, yeah, that's basically my background with Alanis and the background on Alanis and the Jagged Little Pill in a nutshell.
Yeah, my experience with Alanis Morissette in this album is pretty much intertwined. I was sort of right there with you. I knew about Ironic, and I knew about the likes of You Ought to Know. I'll even throw Thank You in there from one of her later albums. Sort of as singles that you would hear if you were listening to the right station or, looking up the right stuff on YouTube. But I never really gave this album a listen until a few years ago when I went to the Rogers Flea Market over in Ohio, and I was just perusing for media as I usually do when I go there. Found this CD, and I said, all right, you know what? Fine. A couple bucks, let's give it a shot. And so I listened to it on the way home, and I immediately understood why it was one of the best-selling albums of all time. So I say we go ahead and dive right into this with the first track, which is All I Really Want.
So I'm gonna eat a slice of humble pie before we get into this track here. So I mentioned that she had two dance pop albums before she released, Jagged Little Pill, and I named one of the albums Atlantic. It's actually a self-titled Alanis. So correcting myself there. What a way to really dive into Women's History Month, review as a man making a mistake. So, anyways, so yeah, getting into the start of the album here with the opening track, All I Really Want. And this track is, for me, you might have done a little bit more research on this album as a whole compared to me, because you're a little bit better when it comes to looking up the singles and chart performance as a collective and how individual tracks perform. But for me, the way that this track opens up the album, it's really good. I almost want to say it's an extremely underrated track, because I don't think this was a single or anything like that. So, kicking off the track here, you get Alanis with questioning the listener, and this other person saying, "Hey, do I stress you out? My sweater is on backwards and inside out," and you say, "How appropriate." And it's just almost it. She starts right out of the gate with this in-your-face attitude, which we're gonna find in a lot of examples in this album. But yeah, I just love how this just opens up the album in such a brash manner, and even on the instrumental fronts, I love how the guitar and the harmonica open everything up. It's a really nice touch. You can tell that this album was made in the 90s, but it's a high qualities 90 offering in that, it's a refreshing take on, 90s alt rock. Like I said, Alanis sounds really crazy passionate here. And I love the chorus here is really solid. You get lyrics and all I really want is some patience, a way to calm the angry voice. The way that she sounds in the chorus with the layered vocals is so nice to my eardrums. I love it so much. And we've also in this track here, we have another Ryan Kern's musical kink in terms of just how I sometimes just really get into a track, and you get the section here where the track just stops and then just picks up right where it left off. So yeah, All I Really Want is a fantastic way to open up the album, and right out of the gate, ladies and gentlemen, we have landed on one of my favorite tracks on the whole record. This track here landed at number 3 for me. And for the record, I mean, obviously I have a top 3 because this is, my third favorite. And I have a bottom nothing.
So, full disclosure, I have a top 3 and a bottom 3 for this album. And I'll explain when we get there. I'll explain. But this track for me lands in neither category. I do agree with you. It's a great way sonically to start the album. The way that like you said, the guitar and harmonica just slashing together and really pushing things through. I also think the drumming with its sort of polyrhythmic hip hop type of feel to it also really adds, I think, the right touch of making this feel as 90s as possible. And I agree that Alanis, especially on the verses, sounds very inquisitive and snarling in a good way. Just sort of this, very in-your-face attitude that she brings to the table. And the lyrics are kind of all over the place, which, again, sets a grand tone for the album, because we're going to get a lot of this sort of pseudo-philosophical motive from Alanis as she's sort of, punching her weight and trying to figure this whole life thing out. I will say what kept this anywhere far from my top 3 is the fact that I think, especially towards the end of the song, it sounds like she's over singing just a titch. Not to the point where I'm going to sink this as far as my bottom 3, but enough where I was like, it's a little much. It's a little much. But otherwise, I agree, it's a solid track to start the album. And again, specifically the way it opens with the instruments, to me, that it almost is on par with Smells Like Teen Spirit as far as a sonic revolution, because when you think of for lack of a better term, female 90s rock, it sounds like this. It sounds, very adult alternative-y, very, you know, grungy, but with a little bit of that polish. So yeah, all I really want is a good, and I would even say more so very appropriate way to start this album.
And I kind of like how you put the grungy but very polished sound to describe the opening track here, because I feel like that's what I was trying to go for, but I couldn't actually like articulate as well as you did with like just how this track sounds and how it's interesting that I mean, I feel like by this point, like after Kurt Cobain's passing, like grunge has officially kind of died, and we see like over time we see a sonic pivot with music where it goes from grunge to like just the late '90s stuff, like the new metal, and like just how like indie rock as a whole becomes a focus, and alt rock. So like I feel like this track here and like what Alanis brings to the whole brings throughout the whole album is an excellent pivot point for like the musical zeitgeist as it is.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And again, it feels like, especially for her coming from the dance pop scene, let's not forget that this is another sonic shift for her. Basically saying, okay, if you expected dance pop like my first two albums, you're SOL. We're not doing that anymore.
So, you ready to move on to another great track on this album here? And I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you don't like this track, we might actually fight. So I'm setting you up for like a potential like pitfall here, but I feel like you might like it. So yeah, you ready to talk about You Ought to Know?
Yeah, and the bad news is for you, I do not like this track. The good news is I love it. So this track, if all I really want was the setup, then You Ought to Know is like the knockdown. And right away, you have that breathy, sort of soft opening where she's saying, I want you to know I'm happy for you, in the most I'm over it, but not over it type of tone ever. And then the second she sings Another Version of Me, the track takes off into this monumental, almost psychotic level of passive-aggressive, mostly aggressive anger on Alanis's part, because of the questions that she's asking this person, who I'm pretty sure, I haven't watched that documentary, but just based on everything I've seen and heard about this song, it's Dave Coulier that we're talking about, Dave Coulier from Full House, that is the inspiration for this song, which will always be hilarious to me because how is that a thing? So yeah, she just goes off on Coulier in this song, and she sounds angry, she sounds righteous, she sounds pissed, and just basically just trying as hard as she can to twist the knife on him, and she does an amazing job of it. But what really makes this song even better than just an angry, powerful, angry woman song is the fact that the instrumentation is also top tier. Because on this track, you have Ben Montench, Tom Petty's keyboard player, on keyboard. You have Dave Navarro on guitar. You have Flea, fully clothed or otherwise, on bass. And they all sound great, but the real hero, I think, here, and granted, it's a little bit of a drummer's bias here, but Matt Laug on this track, the way, particularly, when he does the little drum fills before the pre-choruses, are perfect. Especially after Alanis drops that F-bomb right before the second pre-chorus, and you hear him hit the snare and the cymbal right at the same time going into that fill. It is just perfect. Perfect musical moment for me. But realistically, despite all that, the star of the show still is Alanis, who sings great. She sings very agitatedly, particularly on that final pre-chorus, when she's saying, scratches down your back. I hope you feel it. Can you feel it? And then she hits that chorus. And it's a great chorus. It's like an all-time great 90s chorus. So, yeah, We Are Not Fighting. That's done by Alanis very well in this song. Easily, by no question, this is my favorite song on this album.
Oh, I knew you're a man of, impeccable taste, because, I'm right there with you. This is my favorite track on the album as a whole, by a country mile. Nothing to take away from any other track on this album, but, oh, man, I'm just gonna expand upon this stuff that you were talking about. So, we talk about, how Alanis is just so angry here, and, how it's just so personal. The lyrics here are mind-blowingly sadistic, angry, basically, this woman that has just gotten possessed with the spirit of just oh, I'm just so boiling angry about the situation. I'm saying that as as a straight white male in America, but I digress. I'm an ally out there to those people who are in need. But anyways, so just a couple moments I want to highlight on the lyrical front. The one moment where she's asking, hey, would she go down on you in a theater? That is a bar, and also one of my absolute favorite moments in this track here on the lyrical front. It's a moment where she's talking to him about, oh, sorry to bother you at dinner. And, you could really just picture the scene where Alanis is calling, Dave Coulier while he's, having dinner with his family. And, Alanis is on the phone, and he's just I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. That's just such a great moment. I love it so much. Chorus here is solid. Just a great attitude that she's displaying. And, yeah, just the only other thing that I'm going to add that you didn't already touch upon, it's just the ending, where it basically has Alanis, repeating, you oughta know, and, the instrumentation just cuts out and you just hear Alanis. That's such a great moment. Again, that's another musical kink of mine, apparently. But I digress. You Oughta Know is it's such a great song. It's what has put Alanis on the map for so many reasons, and it is well deserved.
It is one of the songs that rightfully defines the 1990s rock scene, because it's basically, I would say it's probably angrier, if not as angry as anything Nirvana ever released. I know we talked about it on In Utero well over a year ago, I think, but yeah, no, this song is angry, and it's catchy, and it's perfectly executed. And for further listening, particularly between the relationship between Dave Coulier and Alanis Morissette, may I recommend the Neil Cicierega track called Alanis from his first album, where he takes the vocal line from this song and somehow mashes up with the Full House theme song. It is glorious, but that's another subject for another day. So, moving on to the third track on Jagged Little Pill, which is Perfect, right? I believe it is your turn.
So, with Perfect here, we get a different side of Alanis, because, all I really want was just an excellent warm-up to the firecracker of all firecrackers that You Oughta Know was. And here we get Alanis kind of pulling it back in terms of just on the instrumental front, and basically at least starting out just exploring a more softer sonic palette. You get that opening with the gentle guitar and Alanis just singing gentle lines, and I just as the track kind of builds, I just love I'm liking the moments that it just adds a layer of intensity, not just a layer of instrumentation, but you can just tell the focus and the passion went up by just a hair. It was a great moment that I picked up on. Like the lyrics here, you get lyrics about don't forget to win first place, don't forget to keep that smile on your face. Solid chorus. I also like how in between the first and second chorus, you get a change up in the gender. Like, you get the first chorus where she's saying, be a good boy, try a little harder, you gotta measure up, make me prouder. You get, like, the second chorus, be a good girl, you gotta try a little harder. That simply wasn't good enough to make us proud. That perfectly, that does do a good job, like, examining gender dynamics and just the pressures that, like, men versus women have to deal with growing up, and just overall though, like, as a complete package, it's a decent song. Yeah, and like the other note that I liked is just the calm down you get from the chorus into the last verse. It's a nice moment. And just, at least thematically here, the song is about, like, parents who live vicariously through their children and put all these pressures on them. So, again, this is, like, Alanis telling her struggles of, like, her own personal background, but through a different kind of lens of, like, more looking at her own background and just how her parents were. So, yeah, I like Perfect. It goes in the great song bucket, but doesn't land in my top three.
Yeah, it doesn't land in my top three either, nor does it land in my bottom three. Yeah, the instrumentation on this track, and particularly Alanis' vocal, a lot smoother on this track compared to the first two. Doesn't rock as much, but that's okay because it still sounds really good. Her voice does kind of go into that cracking mode of being snarly and almost snarky in a sense. But at the same time, it's a lot more like tuneful than it was on the first two, even though, again, the first two was meant to be as agitating and in your face as humanly possible. Lyrically, I can't really add much more than what you've already said about what it is. It's about parenting and how pressure is being pushed onto a child. I think Genius.com said this is from the perspective of a parent. I'm not 100% sure I buy that because I feel like it's close. I'm not sure if this is from the perspective of a parent or from the perspective of a child's perspective of their parents' perspective. So aside from that, though, it's a solid song. It's a solid album track, and understandably, I can understand why this track lands where it does on the album. Because if it had all been just push, 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 up tempo, in your face, up tempo, this album could have worn people down. So I'm kind of glad Perfect is where it is on the album.
Yeah, me too, man. And, like, it does show that, Alanis can, like, flex her songwriting chops here and, like, hit us with, like, this kind of ballady kind of track. So, yeah, and I agree with you. Like, I mean, I even did a quick drive-by of the lyrics of this song here while you were saying what Genius.com was saying what this song was essentially about. And I'm kind of mixed there because, yeah, I think I'm in alignment with you, man. So, anyways, you ready to pivot on over to, I got a hand in my pocket?
Yes, hand in my pocket. And this is another track that it feels like we're going back to the theme of the first track, which is All I Really Want, where Alanis is sort of going into pseudo-philosophical mode. And what makes this song work for me is the fact that her vocal, particularly on the chorus, is very optimistic. Because the lyrics, not gonna lie, feel like if you took Katy Perry's Hot and Cold, put it in a blender, and then dumped out the contents. Because I get what I get what she was going for here, and it feels like she's trying to say, hey, I'm this, but I'm that. But it feels like sometimes that she's just picking random words that don't really line up. Like, that wasn't, like, the best for me, but it all comes back on that chorus, which I think is one of the better ones on this album. And I think her singing is some of the best on this album, too. So, basically, what the song is about is optimism through self-awareness. And basically her saying, listen, There are parts of me that are good. There are parts of me that are bad. There are parts of my life that are good. There are parts of my life that are bad. And I'm just taking it one day at a time, making it so we have to get through this because everything's going to be fine. And again, if she wasn't singing as well as she does on the chorus, the optimism would be a lot more skeptical. But it sounds like she's really being positive about this and basically being like, hey man, whatever, everything's going to be fine. Here I am doing this. Here I am hailing a taxi cab, flicking a cigarette, holding up a peace sign, holding up, playing a piano, even though I don't hear any piano on this track. But yeah, this is a solid song. It's not my top three, not my bottom three. Probably in the upper half of the album for me, all things well told.
Hand in My Pocket could have been a track that, popped into my top three. But, what separates this track compared to, a song like All I Really Want is with that track, it seems like it's I like its placement within the album, and it's a very creative approach to breaking down the fourth wall between songwriter and listener, and essentially who that song is for. Here, Hand in My Pocket, it just seems like a really good alt rock track that you find in this album here, and it's one of the, at least from what I know, I've heard this song before, prior to diving into this album, so it's charted pretty well and it's done well as a single, but to your point about how Alanis is her attitude's basically yeah, whatever, man, and the line that basically sums all this up is, and what it boils down to is that no one's really got it figured out. And I think that's a very great line. I like that line. I think that I'm in alignment with you with the whole oh, I'm this but I'm that. It's fine. It's pretty simple, but just the overall songwriting package and how everything sounds together kind of covers that up from being kind of very simple lyric writing. Lannis is sounding good, like you mentioned, and just at least kicking everything off. I like the way that the guitar effects and work out so well in the beginning. But yeah, Hand in My Pocket, it's a solid song. I would raise it above the great song bucket, but it's right below cracking my top three. So it's not a perfect song in my opinion.
No, it's not a perfect song. And again, I don't mind if it's a simple songwriting that she goes with here. But again, going back to, Katy Perry's Hot and You're Cold, the lyrics are simple. Hot, cold, yes, no, in, out, up, down, wrong, right, left, right. Here it feels like whatever she says she is doesn't quite line up like that. When she says, I'm sick, but I'm pretty. Those aren't the opposite of each other. I think I know what you're trying to convey, but it feels like they're just kind of jumbled in a sense there. So that's my only real major critique of this song. Aside from that, it is a very good song on this album. So are you ready to move on to Right Through You?
Wait a minute, man. Yeah, I'm ready.
Womp, womp.
So yeah. I know. I saw that opportunity. I had to run on through it. So yeah, Right Through You. I would say, yeah, in hindsight, Right Through You is probably going to be probably one of the better B-sides on, well, deep cuts, not a B-side because this is the A-side, but one of the deeper cuts off the album for me. The way that the whole track begins with Alanis again breaking down that fourth wall between songwriter and target audience. You get the opening lines, wait a minute, man, you mispronounced my name. You didn't wait for all the information before you turned me away. That's a really great line, and she follows it up with you kind of hurt my feelings, and something about a backloaded pocket. You got meal ticket taste, and the chorus pops up with hey, I see right through you. She's sounding really good there, and outside of that, I really like the lyrics. You took a long, hard look at my ass and then played golf. Misogyny, the patriarchy, and it's working right there. And also, this is a fun line where she's talking about, like, you took me out to wine, dine, 69 me, but you didn't hear a damn word I said. Like, again, like, exploring, like, just the gender dynamics and just how, like, some men are to, like, women. And just like, outside of the lyrical front, Alanis, again, sounding so good, especially on the chorus. Like, it's pure music to my ear holes here. And, like, the instrumental hits that occur during the chorus, they're a very nice touch. And, like, I love the line, "Hello, Mr. Man." Like, again, that's a clever, it's a fun line. And in the third verse, basically you have Alanis turning the whole situation on its head, basically with her saying, like, the "Hello, Mr. Man" line I mentioned. You didn't think I'd come back. You didn't think I'd show up with my army and this ammunition on my back. It's basically saying, like, hey, look at what I've become and look what I made with my life, and you basically have nothing there. And yeah, I'm not gonna give you any credits for, like, I'm not gonna give you any credit for how I am today. So yeah, it's a great track. Maybe upon another listen or two, it could maybe pop into my top three, but I could dig right through you.
I dig right through you as well, and it is in my top three at number 2. Because basically this song, it's astonishing to me that it was never released as a single and remains an album track. Because if You Ought to Know was successful for being such a righteous anthem of being upset at a lover or being upset at a significant other for the way they treat you, this song is that. This song is just as bitter as You Ought to Know, maybe even more so with the lyrics that you were mentioning about looking at asses, playing golf, going out to dinner, and not listening to anything that you said. Oh, by the way, now I'm on the other side of that. Now, allegedly, this is about an executive that Alanis was having an affair with, according to Genius. Part of me still wants to believe it's about Dave Coulier, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that this song, again, not only does a great job of painting this picture of a relationship gone wrong, but sounds really good. You mentioned the chorus, how Alanis harmonizes with herself and sounds much better than she did on All I Really Want in that category. It pops off so well, lifts off so well. It's basically just a streamlined version of You Ought to Know in a sense, and that is not a bad thing at all. More of that, please. This is my second favorite song on the album.
I appreciate that, man. And, like, I did bump up my individual rating on the track, but yeah, I'm glad that you're in alignment with me. I'm very curious to see what your bottom tracks are going to be, man. But, I mean, when we get to them, we're going to get to them. In the meantime, are you ready to boogie on through to Forgiven?
Yes, boogieing on over to Forgiven. And so far throughout this first half of the album, we're seeing a pattern. We're seeing a pattern of a song that's philosophical, a song that's about relationships, and a song that's kind of about childhood. And this track completes that cycle twice over for the first half of this record. And this time she is speaking from a perspective of being raised as a Catholic girl. And it's a really good criticism of it. I mean, there are lines in there. The one that sticks out to me, there's a couple that stick out to me, where she's saying, my brothers didn't go blind, but I may as well have. And then on the chorus where she's saying, we all needed something to cling to, so we did. Throughout this track, there is just a stark criticism of that. And as someone who grew up that way myself, there are a lot of things I related to here. Just, again, the need to sort of force yourself to have morals, but at the same time receive punishment for not doing so, and wondering where the line is drawn, where the line is there for, forgiveness versus damnation. It's a good conversation starter, if nothing else. And particularly on the chorus, the way Alanis sings, I think is great. It might be her best track on this album, singing wise, outside of You Oughta Know, because the way she just delivers the lines on that chorus, it sticks in your head. Like, basically saying, this is what happened to us, and I'm singing about it. And the way she does it on the bridge is great too. And even though it's not necessarily a great like instrumental track compared to You Oughta Know or Right Through You for that matter, it allows for Alanis' voice to pull through and showcase itself. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have completed my top 3. I have Forgiven at number 3.
Oh wow. Okay, so yeah, you're a lot higher on this track than I am. Like I said, there's not a bottom track here, for me at least. But yeah, Forgiven was one of the deep cuts on the album that I appreciated, but probably not nearly as much as you did. I mean, obviously, but I digress. Anyways, get into my thoughts about Forgiven, because I could vamp for 15 more hours basically on the same kind of subject. But yeah, I'm right. The lyric that I did highlight here was the same one that you brought up, where she's saying, I confess my darkest deeds to an envious man, my brothers, they never went blind for what they did, but I may as well have. Great moment. I'm also another thing that I really highlighted here. It's just, I was digging the moments where Alanis is dipping down and going back up vocally. That was a good highlight for me. I like the chorus. It really pops very well. The dynamic contrast here is executed to a T. And the backing strings and the acoustic guitar on the bridge alongside Alanis crooning, to exemplify your point, Alanis does sound really, really good here. That's a great moment for me. And, other than that, I mean, I did appreciate what the subject material was of the song, but, maybe I need to go back into the track just to really just get a new appreciation for it. But yeah, overall though, Forgiven, it's a solid track for me. But very much, at least in my review on my end of the podcast here, it's very much an album track though. So.
I can understand that, and to be perfectly honest with you, it barely beat out a couple of other tracks on this album, like a couple that we're gonna get to, and also I'd probably throw. Hand in My Pocket up in that same category. It was a tough battle for number 3. Numbers 1 and 2 are pretty set in stone, but after that I was just which one? And I think, again, the vocal, particularly on the chorus, puts this one just above everything else.
And I can totally respect that. So, yeah. So before we get into the back half of the review here, Matthew.
Yes, Ryan.
I got a question for you.
What's that?
So if the listener out there is enjoying what we're bringing to the table, and they're appreciating the musical journey that we're bringing them on, because this is probably episode number 70 for us, if I'm not mistaken.
It's close. I want to say we're definitely in the high 60s. I want to say this is episode number 67 or 68. Who knows? It could be the magic one. But no, we have been doing this for a while. But yeah, you were saying?
Yeah, so if the listener out there is just really appreciating what we're providing here in this review here specifically, and they want to help support and ultimately encourage us to do more reviews like this and help us grow as a show, what are some ways that they can help make that happen for us?
Well, they can set their digital devices in a circle, light a fire, and pray to the algorithm gods. A simpler way of doing that would be to go and share our stuff. We're on all platforms for podcasting, whether it be Apple Music, Spotify, that one you mentioned last week that I already forgot the name of, unfortunately.
Pocket Cast.
Pocket Cast, there we go. So shout out to Pocket Cast again. We are on YouTube, where we upload videos featuring our episodes every week. So if you go on YouTube and find us, like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on social media where we post our episodes. We post them onto our Facebook page, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Threads. And also, we have an email account if you want to reach us directly, which is ttheyListen@gmail.com. ttheyListen is our platform across all social medias. You can message us, tell us what you like, what you don't like, what episodes you may want to cover in the future, or may want us to cover in the future. Who knows? Maybe you can cover them too. Maybe we'll have you on as a guest. You never know. But if you like what you hear, subscribe to us, keep listening to us, tell a friend about us. And to those who have already been doing that, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate your support for us and everything we do here at Hey, Listen to This.
So, yeah, I appreciate it as well, and I appreciate you, Matt. You've been an excellent co-host here, and you've helped me introduce countless amount of albums and artists here.
Likewise to you, sir. There's a lot of stuff that I never thought I would have listened to up until we started doing this show, whether it be the likes of Wilco or FX or the Mountain Goats, just to name a few. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm glad to be on it with you, man. So before we get into the back half and I hand over the reins to you for You Learn, just as a recap, so far, Ryan has revealed one song, no, scratch that, 2 songs in his top 3. I have revealed my entire top 3 and none of my bottom 3 yet.
So we might fight. I don't think so because, spoiler alert, the other song that's in my top 3, it's a pretty well known song. So we'll see. We'll see. We could end up fighting. So yeah, diving into the back half of the record here, beginning with You Learn. Here, this is another, what I would like to consider, one of the bigger songs off the album. It's a pretty basic song, to be honest with you, at least on the first drive-by. The chorus is pretty basic. You get, the chorus saying, you live, you learn, you love, you learn. There's a lot of learning there. And, it's almost, reminiscent of one of the earlier tracks, Hand in My Pocket, where it's just she's saying okay, you do this, you learn. And the overall message of the song could be really summed up with the mentality of I recommend biting off more than you can chew to anyone. I certainly do. Basically saying hey, just experience life. You're gonna learn, you're gonna make mistakes, but just experience it. That's basically the whole message of the song. And it's not a bad song by any means. It's too basic enough for me to really kick it up into a top 3. But overall, it's a pretty good package. I think with this track here, though, a couple more moments I want to highlight is I was really digging the backing vocals and how they were doing a back and forth during the bridge here. And also, for the first time in the whole album, the bass work on this track here really stood out to me. It was a good line. And, also the way that Alanis sounds where the vocals are gliding up, that really was a standout moment. And yeah, overall though, if it wasn't for the chorus just being so, basic Linda here, maybe I would appreciate this track just maybe a hair more. But overall though, it's a decent package.
I probably like this song a little more than you do. Obviously, it's not my top 3, but this is one of those songs that came right up to that line and really had a chance at being there. Because I will agree that the chorus is very basic, and that's probably what sank it for me to a number 4 or 5 on this album. But sound-wise, the hook is amazing. Her singing throughout this whole track is great. And I do agree with you wholeheartedly that basically is Hand in My Pocket. The only difference is Hand in My Pocket was about her. This song is about you. So that's the main difference there. And once again, we continue this cyclical pattern of philosophical, relationships, childhood, philosophical, relationships, childhood. Now we're back to philosophical on track 7. And I agree with the back and forth on that bridge is great. The singing is great. Again, I agree with you that there was that little bit that was missing, that sort of to elevate it up to, real top contender status, especially when you have, again, songs that she sang like Right Through You, and Forgiven, and obviously You Ought to Know, that sort of elevated things already to a point where songs like this, are trying to reach, and they do a good job, but they're not quite there.
So yeah, I think that was a good discussion on You Learn. Yeah, you ready to get head over feet for the next track?
Yes, getting to head over feet, and the cycle continues because we move from philosophical to relationships again. But for the first time on this album, we have a very, very optimistic and happy song about relationships because basically this is a song where Alanis is admitting defeat to her lover's charm and basically saying, you already won me over, despite me. You already had me going head over feet. I couldn't help it. It's all your fault. Which is kind of a problematic line, but ultimately he's meant to be cheeky, and I'll take it for its word. And I can see why this was released as a single, because it does have single quality, especially with the way that chorus pops off. The verses are kind of meh, not bad at any rate, but they kind of go in one ear and out the other. And ultimately, I think the difference between this and Hand in My Pocket on the Joyometer is that it seems almost too happy. Like, you're listening to this and thinking, this can't be the same singer. This can't be the same singer that was singing You Ought to Know about 20 minutes ago. It can't possibly be the same. But it is. She sings it well. It's not my bottom 3 because I do like this song. It's a solid album track. I'd probably have this in the top half of the album, maybe around like the 6-7 mark, ultimately.
So I'm a bit higher on this track than you are. It's not my second favorite song on the whole album. I'll start off by saying that. But for me, you talk about, like, is this the same singer? Like, it's almost kind of like, a little bit of a whiplash, that this was the same singer that sang You Ought to Know. For me, it's extremely rewarding, hearing her sing this kind of song. Not trying to, like, maybe stereotype Alanis into a box, because I'd rather hear her do, like, songs like You Ought to Know and, like, a couple of the tracks off this album. But, like, here, the way that she's able to, like, just write, like, execute such a great love song. Like, one lyric that just kind of, I kind of want to highlight here was, you treat me like I'm a princess. I'm not used to liking that. You ask how my day was, and, like, earlier in the album we get in the song Right Through You, where basically this person's just treating Alanis like an object as opposed to like a person. So, like, it's extremely rewarding to hear her get the respect and the admiration that she does deserve. The chorus is really good. I do like the dynamic contrast that you get between the chorus and coming down into the verse. Like, that's a really good moment. The harmonica solo here is really, really solid. And, like, just overall, though, like, I'm just in I'm in complete awe of, like, how well this song lands for me. Like, it really touched me in a personal way. Like, and also, like, it's such a sincere love song that I would almost put it up there, but not quite along the same kind of tier of, like, being a really effective, really great love song as, like, Jesus, etc. by Wilco. And that's high praise, because, like, I consider that to be, like, one of my top 3 songs of all time. But, yeah, overall, though, like, head over feet, really great album track for me. Not quite enough to pop all I really want out of the top three for me, though. So
I understand that, and I definitely respect you sort of bringing forth that argument of, especially compared to a song like Right Through You, how this is rewarding to hear her sort of find that other person that does respect her. And I'm not discouraging you that. My only counter to that would be this, and this is just something to chew on. We don't have to, like, go down knocking fighting, because we may do that in a few tracks here. But you talk about it being rewarding that this is the case. And on a storyline level, yes. But it feels like on a whole package level that the angriest song on the album, You Ought to Know, seems to be the most rewarding for the listener from a lyrical and thing. And again, that's just something to chew on. Can optimism and the happy ending be so rewarding when the most rewarding thing feels like the angriest? It's just sort of a weird philosophical thing that you bring up. But ultimately, I think we're ultimately in agreement on this track as far as it being, a good time.
So yeah, I can yeah, we've touched on head over feet enough here, so we can move over to Mary Jane, and I'll kick off the discussion here. So yeah, with Mary Jane, like we get another track similar to Perfect, where the sonic contrast is just essentially another come down. But like you get the moments where the chorus pops up and Alanis is hitting really good high notes. She's sounding really good there. Not really a traditional chorus though, because it's basically it's a chorus in a sense that it gets highlighted in the track, but there's nothing that's really repeated on the lyrical front. Not necessarily a bad thing, just something I observed. Another track here that I really did appreciate the bass in. I thought it was doing some really good work. And another musical kink for me that I found in this track is just how the band and Alanis are working as one to hit accents. It really does do a good job to highlight certain moments within the track. And for me, the second verse really hits. You get the second verse where she's talking about what's the point of trying to dream anymore. I hear you're losing weight again, Mary Jane. Did you ever wonder who you're losing it for? Basically saying, hey, what's the point of doing anything? What are you actually? What is the reason you do what you do? Is it for yourself or is it for somebody else? And the outro here is decent, but it just seems like it's kind of just riding on vibes, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Mary Jane. What the song is basically about, it's a female empowerment anthem, in a nutshell. But yeah, it's a decent song for me. Nothing really too standoutish to make it pop up into an upper echelon on the tracks here, but solid nonetheless.
Yeah, so for those keeping score at home, you may have noticed that we have 4 tracks to go, and I have not yet revealed any one of my bottom 3 tracks. That ends with this track. This is my second least favorite track on the album, and the majority of the reason why is because of the sonic presence of some things. First time I listened to it, it was my least favorite track on the album. Because I thought the vocals were a little too reverby and floaty for me. You talk about this song, Coasting on Vibes. I think it pushes way too far over the line on that regard. I think her vocals just have way too much reverb on them. And I thought the drum beat was just all over the place and really just sort of not even there. The second time I listened to it in my car instead of through my TV screen, and it did sound a little bit more focused now I knew what was happening. But it is a massive musical whiplash to go from so many songs in basic 4/4 time to this almost 12/8 almost Celtic March type of vibe, which I respect. I do respect them for going for it and trying something different in that regard, but it definitely feels, at least for the first couple minutes, it just feels like it's sort of waiting and not really landing anything down. And I thought the lyrics were just kind of all over the place. I do agree with you that I understand what it was going for with the whole vibe of female empowerment anthem, and just sort of almost like Princess Carolyn for BoJack Horseman giving herself the get your stuff together speech. Like, this is sort of a musical version of that, but I wish for it to be that. I wish it had a little bit more punch, a little bit more panache, again, especially considering the standard that Alanis set for herself earlier in the album. Is this track like truly bad and awful and a no listen skip? No, it's not. It's fine. But compared to everything else, and because of the production choices they made, I do have it as my second least favorite.
And I can respect that. Like, even when I was given like my thoughts and feelings about it, like it's an album track for me. Maybe if it didn't have like that lyrical front where like I was actually kind of like more drawn into like the whole female empowerment angle of it, maybe it could have popped into a bottom track for me. But yeah, it would be a different story if you were saying like a song like All I Really Want, or like another, like, well, we would have really fought if you said You Oughta Know was a bad track. But yeah, overall though, I can respect like your thoughts and feelings about Mary Jane here.
Yes, and again, I don't think this is a bad track. It's just, again, not up to the same standard, and again, just sort of sunk by a couple production choices. So, are you ready to fight? Excuse me, let me try that again. Are you ready to move on to Ironic?
Yeah. And I'm gonna let you, lead off Ironic here.
Okay. So again, I know you have one left, and you said it was a familiar song, so I'm pretty much connecting the dots here. So I'll start with the positives on this track, is that it is a very catchy song, and Alanis does sing very well on it, and the structure of everything is pretty much intact, with the band sounding good and her voice really popping off on that very recognizable chorus. And I'm not going to be one of those people to complain about how, because technically a lot of the stuff that she talks about in this song aren't ironies, they're coincidences or contradictions, but I'm not going to be a grammar alt-right person and say, hey, this is, not what an irony is. What does she think she is? So that doesn't bother me, and I think the music's good, and I think her singing's good. So why do I have this as the third least favorite track on this album? Because the way she sings on the verses compared to the lyrics that are coming out, something about it just rubs me the wrong way. And again, it's not the fact that it's not an irony, it's the fact that she sort of has the same attitude as, let's say, Hand in My Pocket, for example. Like, she's just trying to say, like it's all wrapped up in the chorus where she's saying, and who would have thought, it figures. But here she is talking about dudes dying on a plane, or, like, she's talking about some of these, like, really serious things, like dudes dying after they win the lottery, or, meeting someone that you're being cheated on with. And I'm just thinking, there's just a part of me, like, inside that's like, Alanis, read the room. Now's not the time for this. Especially how, like, these are things, like, that could traumatize people based on their worldview. And it just seems like her attitude is way too aloof for some of the things she's talking about. Again, the second verse where she's talking about this guy saying, who would have thought after, being afraid of flying, getting on a plane that crashes. Like, to me, that's not something that is just glossed over with a sort of like cafe tone of, isn't it ironic? Don't you think? And then and also the fact that it kind of contrasts way too hard with that chorus. Like, I think how hushed the vocals are on the verses with how big the chorus is also feels a bit off-putting. again, much like Mary Jane, I don't think this is a bad song per se. It's executed very well. But some, like, on the second listen, I was just like, I can't ignore the feelings I'm having about the song, and they're not good. So yeah, not my least favorite track on this album, but I do have it as my third least favorite. I had to say what I had to say.
You're tearing me apart, Matthew. So, I'll only start by addressing your criticism there. I'm not like I think we've had plenty enough examples of this where like I'm not one that really gets affected by like sonic delivery of like grim like topics like I think the first time we ever broached this like this concept is when we did our Smiths review, and there was a song in that album that like basically was like a happy-go-lucky kind of song, but it's basically like lyrics are very very dark, talking about like death and such like that. But anyways, like with ironic here, like I really it didn't affect me in terms of like the darkness and like what she was bringing to the table, like the topics of like planes crashing and all the other like instances that she brings up there. I just loved how like just free flowing everything did sound, and like just the concept of like hey, life is kind of funny, and like just weird stuff kind of happens, and like just it's not what life isn't what you think it's gonna be. It is just what it is. Like one of the lyrics that I highlighted here is it's meeting the man of my dreams and then meeting his beautiful wife. Like that's a little crushing right there, but it's just the reality of the life, like how life is, and I think that's what she was more trying to go for. Outside of the lyrical contents in the verses, the way that the whole track starts off is a great moment for me. You get the choice of how everything starts out with the bare acoustic guitar and strings alongside the vocals. That was a very nice touch. And when that chorus hits, man, look out, baby! Like it's so good, man. Like I think that's what maybe put it over the top for me in terms of like making this track ahead of All I Really Want. Again, another track here with the bass just doing some really really solid good work, and like I just love how Alanis sounds here. She's just so great on the vocal delivery front. And another moment I'm going to highlight is like in the bridge, like the back and forth that she has with herself. Like it's a fun moment. But yeah, ironic. I mean, I think I kind of already spelled it out. Like, this is my second favorite track here. I want to say by country mile, but it's definitely a highlight for me.
And I can understand that. Again, musically, it's good. It is good. Like, that chorus does pop off in such a way that, again, showcases how good of a singer Alanis is. And it does very effectively put this song as one of her more memorable songs. I've said this a billion times before on this podcast. I'm going to say it again, and I hate to put this song in the category knowing how much you like it, but this is one of those songs that sounds great if you're not paying attention. And I'll admit, here I might be paying a little too much attention. I might be going a little harsh, a little critical here. I don't think this is a bad song, but again, they're just it rubbed me the wrong way. And I wasn't even going to have a bottom three until I listened to this a second time. I was like, no, I got to say what I got to say. But I can completely understand why you have this in at number 2 on your list.
So, moving over to Not the Doctor, it is the penultimate track on Jagged Little Pill here. And like here we get another like what I would like to consider like another album track, and like spoiler alert, I'm gonna have the same kind of thoughts about like Wake Up, but maybe for a different reason here. Like really great chorus, but it doesn't really pop off. It doesn't really like do enough to take it over the edge. lyrics are great, but again, we get another moment that I didn't realize until like we started diving into this review, basically with Alanis saying, "Hey, I don't want to be blank if blank." So kicking off the the whole track, you get I don't want to be the filler if the void is solely yours, and right the very next lyric is, "I don't want to be your glass of single malt whiskey hidden in the bottom drawer." Basically saying, "Hey, I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that." It's very cut and paste. I do like how it's executed here, but I can't ignore the fact that we brought it up in a couple of the other tracks here. And just overall, Atlantis is sounding great on. Yeah, the only thing I kind of did love about the two other moments here. One, the "I'm not your mother" line is a great line, and the other moment, we get an almost like Ryan Kern's musical kink in this track, where the track kind of hiccups and just kicks into the last chorus. It's a fun moment, but overall, though, not the Doctor. It's all right. It's a good track. I'm not offended by it, but it is what it is.
I can't say I'm offended by it either, but I'm not really anything to buy it. And for those wondering, this is my least favorite track on the album for kind of different reasons than the other two. What put Ironic in the bottom three is the fact that it just felt like it was pushing a wrong tone. With Mary Jane, it felt like, even though it sounded good, there really wasn't a whole lot there. Here, it sounds okay, and there's not a whole lot there. Because to me, what I didn't really like about this track, because again, if you're not paying attention, it sounds fine. It doesn't sound really good like Ironic does if you're not paying attention. This one sounds okay if you're not paying attention. It feels like this whole track is a weird attempt to mix her philosophical nature of songs like All I Really Want and Hand in My Pocket and You Learn with the relationship system she's been dealing with on this album with You Ought to Know and Right Through You. It feels like this is sort of her trying to reaffirm her independence by saying, listen, I'm going to live my life the way you want, and if you can't like that, then there's the door. Which, again, I get it, and I respect it, but it just felt like, especially on this track, the lyrics were all over the place. There were way too many metaphors, why is she not the Doctor? And, why is she saying, hey, here's the times I'm oping. I get what she was trying to go for, but something about it just felt very wish-washy, mishmashing, not very well set. And unlike Ironic, which has sort of those same problems, the music doesn't save it. The chorus to me doesn't pop off at all. The lyrics are just kind of there on the verses, and the verses are just kind of there on a singing level. This, I agree with you, this is an album track in all ways and all terms. And the problem is, like I said earlier, that when you set the standard like you do with songs like All I Really Want, Forgiven, and You Ought to Know, and you're coming with this, it doesn't line up anywhere close to it. So that is why I have this at the bottom.
So maybe the reason why they put her and Glenn Ballard put songs like this at the tail end, it was the '90s. People really just bought the CDs for specific tracks. But again, we're examining albums as a complete art form. I would say, yeah, I don't know. I'm not aligning with your thinking of hey, this is a standard, so therefore other tracks that are inferior to it, kind of really drag down the experience. It's just a different track for me. But I respect your thinking though on that matter.
Yeah, no, and again, if you're just listening to this album front to back and, just sort of appreciating it as a whole package, this isn't going to bring down the experience. It's not a horrible, unforgivable track like some others we've mentioned in the past where we're just this song sucks and you shouldn't listen to it at all. Like if you're listening to this out front to back, it's gonna sort of go one in one ear and out the other. And again, it just there were too many parts that were left unpieced together that it just kind of I was like I like if I were to truly skip any track on this album, it would probably be this one. And that's pretty much what it comes down to.
All right, so you ready to wrap up the discussion of Jagged Little Pill with the final track, Wake Up?
Yes, the final track, which is Wake Up. And here we have a track that lyrically, to me, is a lot more focused than Not the Doctor. And basically, this is a song about how Alanis is attacking the other person for needing everything in their lives to be convenient. And also for not just being convenient, but being transactional. Basically saying, listen, this is the way things are going to be. There's not going to be a whole lot of talk about this. It's just going to be, here's what we do, and this is how I want to do it, and that's that. And she comes at this person, probably a lover, in a way that's like, listen, I see what you're doing, I don't like it, and that's not how things are going to work. Sonically, it's a lot better. I think the harmonies on this track are a lot better than they have been for the last couple tracks. Well, at least the last track. And the way it ends with her going, get up, get up, get up, wake up. I thought that was a great way to finish the album. I almost feel like, almost like a trick to start the album over again, if need be. The band sounds good on here. I think this is a really solid album closer. To me, it's a lot album tracky too, but in a good way. I thought this track was good.
So I'm right there with you on some fronts, but I want to expand upon some other fronts as well. So I will say I think in the a couple of the more recent reviews that we've done, that sometimes the final track has been a little bit of a miss in terms of wrapping up themes. This track here does an excellent job of that, because you get that angry side you mentioned, where it's just hey, lyrics you like snow, but only when it's warm, when only things are a certain way that you want them. Again, you get that little sinister side, but you also get at the end of the track here, where it almost seems like you alluded to, where Alanis is trying to wake herself up, trying to motivate herself to move on to bigger and better things. That's a great message ultimately to land on thematically. Just I kind of wish things maybe would have popped a little bit more in here on the chorus. Everything sounds really good, but the chorus never really pops. It just kind of just sizzles. And I can always appreciate songwriters and artists when they do that, but I just was expecting maybe just a little bit more, especially for a final track. But not a bad choice though. What I will say though, the only thing that really held me back from really appreciating this song a lot is at the very end you get her saying that wake up, but around that point you get a breathing effects where it's just that's a bit of a choice, and it was a turn off for me. I'm gonna admit, you could have easily cut that out and had just as an effective or even more effective conclusion to the track and the album as a whole. But yeah, just overall though, sonically things do line up pretty well. You get some misses here. Bass part is solid as well. But yeah, overall though, Wake Up, it's kind of a mixed bag for me in terms of the listening experience. But I ultimately land on the track with, it's a good track. It's a good track for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I do agree that it probably could have elevated itself even higher if the chorus did pop off a little more. I wasn't as turned off by those breathing sounds as you were, which is a weird thing to say out of context, but don't do that. But yeah, no, I thought the way that ended with the breaths and her repeating "Get Up," I thought was executed pretty well. And again, it's a solid album track, and again, compared to the three previous tracks, which all landed in my bottom three, I thought "Wake Up" was pretty refreshing.
So, you want to know what else is pretty refreshing, man?
Could it possibly be the fact that we did it?
We did it, man. We walked with Alanis Morissette, and we experienced her Jagged Little Pill alongside her, and we are better after the whole experience. We're better people for it.
I agree. I agree.
So, I'm going to go first in terms of my overall thoughts, ratings, and opinions on the whole experience for me. So, I began the review and just the whole experience with dissecting Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette with the understanding that, hey, this is a very good, quintessential, female rock album that basically paved the way for countless amount of female artists afterward that really just showed a lot of women that wanted to break into the industry that, hey, you can actually have this kind of side to you and still be effective. And this album really stood up to that benchmark for me. I really loved reviewing it. It's a classic. One of the I think the main thing that I'm going to take away from my experience with dissecting a Jagged Little Pill is just Alanis' ability to show her passion and songwriting ability, countless amount of times throughout this album. Songs like "You Oughta Know," "Ironic," and all I Really Want are fantastic rock songs and rock staples for a reason. And not even from the standpoint of hey, they are female rock anthems, but the fact that they are just delivered so well and just with such passion just instantly makes this a really good album, listening experience for me. I'm not going to give this album a perfect score because, there are still some hiccups and, there's too many, hey, this is an album track here for me to really just say, hey, nope, no notes. I really love the whole experience here. But I will give a Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette a solid 9 out of 10.
So, my experience with this album is slightly different because obviously I did have that little skid towards the end. But again, those tracks at the end were not necessarily bad. They were just kind of meh. And what sets apart, what forgives that meh is the fact that the first half of this album, I would even say the first 2/3 of it, is definitive, powerful 90s rock. Not just the fact that it's female 90s rock, but just 90s rock in general. If you put a list of all the rock albums from the 90s, I would be hard pressed to keep this out of the top 20, maybe even out of the top 10. It's good. It's really good, especially with the sonic blast of All I Really Want, confessional songs like Forgiven, and powerful diatribes against lovers like Right Through You, and especially You Oughta Know. If nobody ever takes anything else away from this album, take that song and run with it and be happy with it. And to me, ultimately, this album reflects, again, what you described earlier as a shift for female artists that would continue on into the 90s and in the early 2000s of both empowerment and independence and a more heavier sound for them. So that cannot be denied. And because of that, I am going to just slightly go under you and give this album an 8.5 out of 10.
So, I give it a 9. You give it an 8.5. That makes our overall score an 8.75 out of 10. Why is that, Matt?
It is because math.
Math works, everyone. So, yeah, for me, for the next album recommendation here, I'm going to go with an album that was released, a couple decades before Jagged Little Pill was dropped into planet Earth here, and that is gonna be an album by Patti Smith, and that album's gonna be called Horses. For those of you who are not familiar with Patti Smith Horses, it's a really solid female singer songwriter rock album, and I think it basically laid out the framework that Alanis basically operates within here. You get very passionate lyrics, great vocal deliveries, excellent song structures, and just overall a very good complete package. So yeah, for me, easy recommendation: Horses by Patti Smith.
That is a great recommendation. It's been a minute since I listened to that album, though I did get a Gloria spin the other night on my travels. So, yeah, no, that's a good recommendation. My recommendation is a bit more simplistic and a bit more of a cop-out, honestly, if I'm being completely straightforward. But my recommendation for Jagged Little Pill is going to be an album that we have reviewed on the show a long time ago. It's another female-oriented rock album from the 90s, and that is Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville. That album, very much in the same vein as this album, dealing with relationships and life issues, more so on the relationship stuff. And if you appreciate the sonic palette of this, or maybe you're looking for something a little heavier or dirtier or grungier, I would point you in that direction. So Exile in Guyville, my next recommendation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've experienced Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, and you're looking for other albums of expand your musical palette, along the same kind of veins, both me and Matt recommend Horses by Patti Smith and Exile in Guyville by Liz Phair. If those of you who want to check out that review as well, that was with one of our earlier reviews, so I'd be interested in re-examining that album maybe at a later time. But yeah, both solid albums, so.
Agreed. So, heading into week number 2 of Women's History Month, it is my turn to bestow to you, Ryan, a pair of options. And my original idea was to go with a pair of albums from the 70s, but I'm going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to give you the option of 2 albums, and I'm going to sort of do what you did, where the first album that I'm going to talk about is older, and the second album that we're going to talk about is newer. And I will warn you now, the second album, you're not going to even get an option. But for this one, you will. So, for this first album, I'm going to give you the option of either the 1970s or the 1980s.
So I'm going to go 1980s, only for the pure fact that we were just in the 70s with a tribute to Jack Johnson. So yeah, that's basically my logic there.
That's totally fair. And for the record, we've been 2 reviews in a row for me in the 1970s. That's kind of why I switched things up, because before it was Sly and the Family Stone. So we were getting out of the early 70s, pivoting towards the mid-80s, and specifically the 1983 release by one Cyndi Lauper called She's So Unusual.
All right, man. So, I know a little about Cyndi Lauper. I know that she had that one song. But yeah, I'm very excited to check out Cyndi Lauper and her 1983 release. So yeah, I'm excited, my dude.
I am too. I actually just listened to that album today, so we will be talking about that next time on Hey, Listen to This. But before we go, Ryan, any final thoughts on Jagged Little Pill?
Just my new life mantra. I know 2025 has been a challenging year. We're officially in the 276th day in January, in my opinion. But you gotta take life one day at a time. You live and you learn.
Congratulations, Canada.